Yu-Gi-Oh is too damn expensive. Let me know in the comment section down below if you agree or disagree with anything or everything I talk about in this video. If you haven't heard, Yu-Gi-Oh card prices went up 20 cents. So normally for one booster pack, you would have paid $3.99 and now you're paying $4.19. I don't know why I said $3.99. You're paying $4.19. Now, in the grand scheme of things, that's really not that much. But if you really think about it and you think about how card prices do or rather have escalated in the last year or two, there are a couple of reasons as to why, right? Supply and demand being one of the biggest reasons as to why Yu-Gi-Oh card prices, whether it be MSRP or on the secondary market, are going up in price. If you don't know anything about supply or demand, it's easy. If there is more demand and less supply, the price will go up, right? But if there is more supply than there is more demand, then the prices will come down. It's really simple if you think about it. Now, Yu-Gi-Oh has come into this boom, with the whole inclusion of Moist Critical and like all these people buying out Yu-Gi-Oh collections and buying like all these like LOB first edition booster boxes. More light has been shown onto the Yu-Gi-Oh scene in general, right? And with the whole vendor limit of $100 going away, now vendors can sell cards for way over the price, at these venues, and that affects the secondhand market as well. If you look at staple cards, normally like these cards, you're looking at northwards of like $150, right? Like Access Code Talker before the reprint was $170 and even closer to $180 at its peak price. And if you even look at Burst of Destiny, the set that just came out, when Destroy Phoenix Unfortunately came out, it was $150 out the gate, right? Ecclesia was $100+ out the gate. Moye was like $75. Like card prices are getting so high, and it's kind of like gatekeeping people from entering into the game, right? You can argue that even though the card prices are high, there are card prices that are lower and they can play like more budget decks and play more casually. But if there is a player that wants to play competitively and they're looking to like build like, let's say a meta competitive Sword Soul deck, you're looking at like a $1,500 main deck with like a $300 extra deck and another $150 to $300 in the side deck, depending on the type of rarities you are playing. But in the main deck, like if you need Forbidden Droplets, which the cheapest copy are the Secrets at $130, or thank God Triple Tactics Talents got reprinted, but they're still sitting at like $45 a copy. Crossout Designator is another $50, and you need these cards in the main deck. The issue with like the Yu-Gi-Oh community, the second market in general, it's a little tough, right? And as a content creator, content creators do have some sort of kind of pull in the community, especially like if we put out a deck profile, right? And we say this card won us the game, and it rightfully did. Like, we're not spreading false advertisement. We're not like trying to scam anyone, but let's say, hey, this card did really well. It performed really well. It overperformed, and I highly recommend that you try it, and you try it as well. There's no malicious intent. Like I'm not buying 1 million copies of the card just so I can sell it at a higher price. Like no one has time for that. But then unironically, when these videos do get 10,000 views, there aren't that many copies of that card out there. And a lot of players do look at these deck profiles to really, kind of see the type of cards that they do want to grab. Now the bigger issue is this, right? It's like when people are saying that the Yu-Gi-Oh content creators are the ones gatekeeping and keeping the prices high, but at the end of the day, for those of you that don't know, there are groups of people who do targeted buyouts, right? Like there's like this whole like tertiary market where these players with deep pockets would buy out cards and then resell them at a higher price to inflate the prices. But you have to understand, like, we buy these cards, right? At the end of the day, like, you can quote unquote boycott Yu-Gi-Oh, but by not buying cards. But then at the end of the day, that means you can't play. You can't play the deck that you want to play at the rarity that you want to play it, or the tech choices that you saw in another video. But there really is no solution to this problem, right? Because like let's talk about a couple different solutions that that you could put out there, right? Like, hey, like why doesn't Konami just drop the MSRP of the cards that they're selling, right? Well, they're not going to do that because Konami also has to make money, and they're not going to make less money just so the secondary market can sell it at the same price, right? Because even if Konami did drop the MSRP of product, the secondary market would not change whatsoever. The singles market is very volatile, but at the same time, it's very predictable, right? Because generally speaking, you never want to buy cards at pre-sale prices, right? Because these prices are really absorbent. There are cards that you do want to buy at pre-sale prices. Access Code Talker being one of the greater examples, because during pre-sale prices, Access Code Talker was like $35. Imagine buying 3 access codes at $35 and then selling them at $180. You did make a lot of money, but at the end of the day, as a player, you have to also realize that you can't just look at cards at face value. And I think that's one of the bigger problems in the Yu-Gi-Oh community, is that players look at cards, look at like card value at face value. Like, oh, I could buy this card for $180 at its inflated price, or I can wait for the reprint and buy it at $120, right? And I'm saving $60. But the issue with looking at card prices at at face value is that you don't factor in the time that you play with this card, right? Like, no one can predict the Yu-Gi-Oh! Konami market. No one can do that because we don't know when Konami's gonna reprint cards or drop a new set, or make an archetype much stronger than it already is. But at the end of the day, you also have to realize that the time you spent with this card also matters, right? If I bought Access Code at $180 at its peak price point, and it's gonna get reprinted in like 5 to 6 months, that means I got minimum 5 to 6 months play with this Access Code Talker, right? And even with the reprint, we don't know how expensive the reprint is going to be. So you can't really factor in like, oh, the card's gonna drop to $30. So I go minus 150, because like you absolutely don't know that, right? Even though Access Code Talker did get announced as a premium gold rare, a lot of people will buy that card. Yes, the secret will come down to under $100, but the gold rare might be $30, $40, $50, $60, and we don't know how much that's going to be, right? And at the end of the day, you have to understand the time of play that you've had with a card absolutely factors into the value of the card. Because if I, if I topped locals like all the time because of Access Code Talker, or if I won or topped the regionals, or I got to play in the regionals more comfortably because I had Access Code Talker, then there has to be some semblance of value there, right? As Yu-Gi-Oh players, you really can't just look at a card at face value and expect to buy and sell at that value, right? Because like the whole thing about Yu-Gi-Oh secondary market is, oh yeah, you got to buy low and sell high, sell right before the reprint gets announced. But I mean, we don't know when the reprints are going to get announced. And people panic sell, which just drives down the market, and people panic buy when new sets come out, and when people are saying like, oh yeah, this card's going to be really good, or this card's going to be really good, it'll drive the price up. So at the end of the day, like, the only people that we can blame for the price hikes, or like the barrier to entry into Yu-Gi-Oh in terms of finances, is us. It's us as the players. Like, we are literally the problem, right? Because we'll buy the cards no matter what, right? Because at the end of the day, like, to be quite honest, the mindset that a lot of players have is like, it's not my problem, right? If little Timmy can't afford the card, but I can, who cares if little Timmy can't play Access Code Talker, right? Because I have Access Code Talker. And that's the mentality of a lot of players. And there's, to be quite frank with you, and to be very blunt, there's nothing wrong with that, right? The fact that I can afford this card, but other people can't, at the end of the day, like, no one's going to look out for you except yourself, right? So there's no reason where, I need to worry about a fellow duelist when it comes to finances, at least, right? Because my job as a duelist is to make sure that the person that I am dueling against has a good time, right? And there's no cheating involved, there's no malicious intent involved, and the game is played to the best of our abilities without any malicious intent. But when it comes to Yu-Gi-Oh being too damn expensive, at the end of the day, it's something that we can complain about, yes, right? But is there anything that Konami can do? Is there anything that we can do as an individual player, right? And even if we signed a petition to limit a card price, like, will people sign it? Because you have to realize, like, there are collectors out there, there are casual players, and then there are competitive players. And you have to really ask yourself, like, as a budget player, or as a player who needs these cards, like, because that's like the only group, right? Like, are there enough budget players to really get something, like to start this revolution of capping card prices, right? Because collectors, then why are collectors collecting, and why, how are competitive players playing competitively with competitive meta staples, if everyone has access to them? And yes, you can argue that if everyone has access to these cards, then you'll have more competitive players. But at the end of the day, that's why rogue decks exist, right? That's why tech choices do exist. And not every card is expensive, right? And another argument that you can make is that, oh, without like prosperity, you can't play certain decks, right? Because the deck can't function with desires or pot of extravagance. Like you need pot of prosperity. But frankly, to be quite frank with you, there are like hundreds of strategies, like hundreds of archetypes, and thousands of decks that you can play. And if you're considering yourself a competitive player, then I think most competitive players will say that like dishing out money for staples is just part of the competitive scene, right? So as a budget player, you can still be competitive, but you can't really directly inject yourself into like the meta competitive play, because the barrier to entry for competitive play is there, right? If you're talking about casual players or budget players, yes, they can also be competitive, but at the same time, that barrier to entry doesn't exist because they're not going to win the next YCS or farm world points or win nationals, right? So I think like this whole argument of like, is Yu-Gi-Oh too expensive? Is Yu-Gi-Oh worth it? I think, you have to understand that as a player, if you want to play competitively, that is the pill you have to swallow, right? Like with competitive play comes cards that you absolutely need. But as a budget player, as a rogue player, as a casual player, this barrier to entry isn't as big as you think it is, simply because, you don't need triple tactics talents or cross-out designator or all these expensive cards, right? All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I know this was like a Susu rants video, but if you like content like this, make sure to subscribe, like, and comment. Hit that notification bell to join the squad, and let me know in the comment section down below. Do you agree with what I said? Is there anything that you disagreed with? Do you think like a way to fix this problem? And because, honestly, if you have some like 30 brain, like Albert Einstein level theory that we can all kind of get behind, like I would love to hear it. All right, guys. And also, if you check out the merch page, the new Nico and Nami gold medal field centers are up on the website right now. You can purchase them, and we are dropping a really special Sword Soul playmat and field center combo next week. All right, that announcement will be on Twitch over at twitch.tv/head-to-head battles. Make sure you're following us on all of our platforms. In the description box down below, there is a link tree. That's all you have to click. I literally did 90% of the work for you. All right, guys? So this is Susu from Head-to-Head Battles. I love you guys so freaking much, and I am signing out. What's up, guys?
If you haven't subscribed, make sure to click that button right there in the middle.
Also, if you haven't watched that video that YouTube is recommending you, it's probably crazy, all right? Go watch it. This is Susu from Head-to-Head Battles.
Head-to-Head Battles.
Signing out.